Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton, a gentleman of great repute and knowledge on many subjects.
Greetings.
And we often start with a little discussion about some kind of bit of wisdom you'd like to present to our large audience. And I understand there's a bullet in the breach, so to speak. You have something of consequence to share?
Well, based on a few things that we were talking about just before the cameras started rolling, I think it would feed in very nicely to what we're planning to talk about this evening, was an insult hurled at Disraeli by one of his critics. And of course, this was back when people were somewhat more educated, refined. What's the word you want to use?
Now, on that point, let's mention to the audience, Disraeli was a 19th century British prime minister.
Yes, a very capable one,
yes.
And a very quick-witted one,
yes.
as well.
Yes.
And of course, if anyone watches Question Time in the House of Commons even today,
yes.
you will
yes.
see
right.
a much greater witticism, I should say.
Right.
But
yes.
this critic of Disraeli said to him once in the House, "Sir, you will die either on the gallows or of some horrible disease." And Disraeli, without missing a beat, responded, "That depends, sir, on whether I embrace your policies or your mistress."
Well, that's a pretty clever retort.
Yes.
That's a little racy, but I'll let it pass. I'll let that pass. Well, as we go forward, we're in the middle of the national political dialogue, as we all always are, and it would be interesting to wonder, as we in this confrontational period, the path toward national righteousness, how we could get there, and is there any way that the political warfare going now before us could soften any to just look after some national problems that might be of consequence? We've talked about a few. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? Maybe I'll start off by asking, what should we do about the national debt? And have we gotten any policy positions from either camp?
Just empty promises, and people tend not to talk about it too much. I mean, this is by talking about the national debt, as well as, I would say, age limits, which obviously is a very big one right now.
Yes.
But take your pick. Obviously, Congress has no incentive to work on the national debt problem. I mean, it's essentially a matter of bringing home the pork to buy votes. I mean, it's always been thus. It's always going to be thus. But the Congress is not going to vote a limit on itself. You're going to have a balanced budget amendment. And this is one of the 2 or 3 great existential threats facing the United States. One, I would say, is the environment. The other is the national debt. The third is tolerance, I suppose, centrist politics, and our move away from that. But as for the national debt, you're going to need a constitutional amendment. And unfortunately, Congress is in the position of proposing constitutional amendments as well as blocking constitutional amendments. The Article 5 convention process would allow us theoretically to bypass Congress and propose amendments directly to the states. But I believe that the founders, were short-sighted in that regard. Even for the congressional bypass project, Congress plays a role, and Congress has been leveraging that to prevent balanced budget amendments.
Well, just to go along those, just continue with on that subject. One thing to do is to more taxes. And so we are getting some kind of discussion along those lines. And it appears the Democrats wish to raise taxes, but only on a small part of the country, where they think there may be money. And about over 50% of the population does not pay income tax. There are other taxes out there, but so there's at least a plan in that direction to, well, we'll lower everyone else's taxes, or we certainly won't raise them. And on the other side, I think the idea is, as I understand it, from former President Trump, is to not raise taxes, indeed lower them in some ways, and then institute a rather draconian tariff. And that great amounts of money will flood in that way in a painless fashion. So each of the political parties are suggesting painless ways, allegedly painless ways, to take care of this with increasing federal receipts. And of course, beneath the rhetoric, there is an impact. So if tariffs go up, then it's a regressive tax generally. So the lower part of the economic classification of the country gets unduly hit with that. And it does have several other impacts. And indeed, it's been a popular conundrum in the country for a long time. Maybe you could comment on the idea of tariffs as a money-raising possibility for the country. And indeed, I think that was pretty much the sole income of the national government for many years.
True. Well, before we get to the tariff in particular, though, I want to focus on that important word you said, the allegedly, regarding tax cuts. The problem is that I would tend to get you one, that if either of these policies, if we follow through with either of them, boosting the income tax or taxing corporate or capital gains or tariffs, I will guarantee you that any new revenues from any of these sources, if any, will not be earmarked for debt reduction. I will guarantee you they will go for more pork. And so the problem is, rather than alleviated, it's made even worse. But moving beyond that, we'll start with the tariff and then we'll look at the
Which
other
is,
side.
I think that would be something you can bounce the basketball from a historic point of view.
Yes,
quite well.
yes. So, tariffs, until the income tax, the national federal income tax was formally allowed subsequent to the 16th Amendment of 1913. There had been a couple of small federal income taxes prior to that. One during the Civil War as a wartime measure, and another enacted in the early 1890s, which the Supreme Court actually struck down as an unconstitutional direct tax, and which necessitated the passage of the 16th Amendment. The tariff was the principal source of federal income, along with some national excise taxes. And if you're going to have big government, if you're going to have more government agencies, if you're going to have more watchdog agencies, a new revenue stream was needed, which was why the populists and progressive parties said we've got to start taxing incomes. And initially, the taxing of incomes was envisioned, or at least marketed, as very modest, as we're talking 3 or 4% of incomes, the top few percent bracket. Now, of course, we don't have that anymore. We have an upper bracket of north of almost 40% for some of the highest figures. I do believe that free trade has, in the long run, been bad for the United States economy.
That's quite a thing to say, by the way.
Well, I do think so. It's led to a massive wealth gap. It's led to a lot of blue collar jobs being offshored to the benefit of top level investors. So it's led to, I'd say, possible national security problems. Semiconductors and various other fundamental devices that are important for the national security. These production now cannot be found in the United States. I do think if we try to reimpose protectionism, that's going to invite retaliation, and you'll see what you got with the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, which was an attempt to protect the United States economy from sliding into an even worse depression. And at that point, you got retaliation because the depression was worldwide, and it made the depression even worse. So it's like an addict going cold turkey. We have fallen in love with these rock bottom prices at Walmart, these cheap goods that are produced. They are not built to last. This hemorrhage of money out of the United States to the developing world. And so protectionism, you would see an end to those low prices. So for at least the short term, the cure would be worse than the disease.
So there would be inflation and some market dislocation. So the things that, I don't know, maybe you can grow avocados well in Mexico, but not too well in Arizona. So you wind up with bad avocados. And the other issue is the world community would get quite a nip. All kinds of unknowable economic events would take place, and indeed will take place. So someone may well move into our place in the world. Our reserve currency could be threatened. All
Yes.
kinds of issues.
Well, China's already starting to do that. I mean, China has followed a protectionist Hamiltonian policy for the last few decades, and it's beating the pants off us.
Well, I won't go. I mean, possibly, in some ways, possibly. The true story is not out yet in China, particularly with its disguised real estate debt. So there are all kinds of things that we're a lot of bouncing basketballs. So that's quite a thing to impose a big tariff now. I well remember that Ross Perot was saying that when the North American, I guess, Economic Treaty was passed,
NAFTA, back
all
in
the sucking
1990.
jobs, all the
giant
jobs.
sucking sound, yes.
Well, allegedly, what also is happening, it's keeping people in Mexico, possibly, if you believe that. Although I don't know the number of illegal immigrants that are crossing that are Mexican. I'm not sure. Maybe it's not particularly doing everything that it might do, but the story is, and then I think candidate Harris, who's running for president of the Democratic Party, as we all know, I think was saying that the cure for illegal immigration is better economic circumstances in other countries, and that could help with access to the U.S. market, et cetera, et cetera. So there could be an argument for stability and classic. This is a long, and maybe we can move past this, but it's a long, long debate on free trade that goes back at least a century or two as to whether it's good or bad to have free trade. We could say that pretty much the argument has been free trade is beneficial, and that Trump is putting a new card on the table with these tariffs.
I'd say not new card, because he actually played this card before in 2016, and he actually did impose some tariffs, and it did invite retaliation from China. I believe the tariffs were on steel. I'd have to go look back at that. But yeah, when you say good or not, you have to say good for whom and good for how long. I mean, once again, investors in big American productive corporations that have offshored their labor and the actual manufacturing, they've cleaned up. The American blue-collar worker has, in the short run, gotten those Walmart prices, but he's also had difficulty finding work.
And so one of the issues, not to make too fine of a point on it, is if the American corporations are prosperous, they presumably have a lot of tax revenue the government can harvest.
Which Kamala Harris wants to increase the harvest of.
Right,
So.
and then send the money to the aggrieved economic class in the country. So, well, I get cheap prices at Walmart, I can't get a job, or really much of a job, but I get a lot of money from the government. They do this, they do that. They have earned income tax credits. I've got this, I get that. All kinds of advantages.
Yes. But if I can jump in there, it's a decrease in efficiency, because you have to have the government workers who are essentially taking their cut, which also increases the pool to divert to the pork projects that may not be the most efficient use of the money.
Well, the efficiency is maybe a the sine qua non of capitalism. Making a profit, it's a silo kind of thing where I'm going to make a profit no matter how I do it, and all the secondary factors are ignored. If you have a company, you pretty much you just want your bottom line to be a good one. And the issue is we have such a complicated world. When that type of ethos is widely established, then all kinds of squeaky wheels happen, and the economic dislocations are more evident. And that's, I think, particularly true right now with the inequality story, which is, you could make a big story. I'm not sure that's well enough understood, but certainly it's touted that a government's job is to tax the rich and give to the poor, so to speak, kind of a Robin Hood type of government.
Some people would disagree with that.
But I mean, many people might say that.
Yes. But I think the problem with that, though, is the layer that you're putting on top of the market, the idea of the government involvement. It's mucking around a great deal with Adam Smith's invisible hand. It becomes no longer which business or which sector or which particular company is the most efficient. It's which congressman has the most juice and can divert the funds in the way most beneficial to her or his campaign chest. And that would be a huge distortion of the free market. And incidentally, that ties at least indirectly and perhaps directly into the other big concern that I mentioned earlier, age limits. So if somebody's 96 and he's drooling, but his staffers still have the Rolodexes with the contributors, then that state or that district is going to get the pork, further distorting the problem, which further disincentivizes getting the politicians out when they should go.
Well, we're having quite a little discussion here. It can go in many different ways. I would just say this, is that having a discussion on the economic underpinning of the country, how we manage the debt, goes in many different directions. And there's not any, I think, particularly erudite discussion underway. Instead, one side says the other, well, you're just terrible, and on and on. The other side says, no, I'm going to make the place great, and you'll destroy the place. Back and forth with relatively little interchange and not much of a discussion about the government's role in tax collections and what they do with the money and the fact they borrow the money. So that would be an issue. And I'll say, but just moving on, one or two quick points that maybe we can talk about the impact of age on decision making. But the deal is, okay, more income tax money coming in, or you could spend less. And so that would be one way to do something about it. We're going to run a surplus by the government spending less money. Well, if it spent less money, there'd be an argument that the multiplier effect would be diminished. So that's what causes depressions. And that's one thing I think the Federal Reserve, what they're doing is last thing they want is a depression or people hiding their money in the basement or money becoming more valuable. And so if the government really stops spending, that might tilt things in that direction, and that would be an issue. Besides, from a practical point of view, it would be difficult to put such a policy in place. What you could ask for would be more efficiency, and then I think another important thing would be when the government spends its money, it's not like a mother bird bringing a little worm back to the small nestlings in the nest or the little baby birds. No, just give them what they need, a big hamburger, a new car. What the government can do with its expenditures is consider the investment issues that happen. So, for instance, if the government does something to put clean water there, it spends money on clean water, then that causes a healthier, more productive population. The same with clean air. The same maybe with mass transportation. So if we're putting people quickly back and forth They don't have to drive to Atlanta on the crowded highways, no accidents. So there's substantial advantages with that.
Absolutely.
There are all kinds of things that the government, the way that it spends this trillions of dollars, that they could at least consider the investment options that happen. So, for instance,
indeed.
money on education.
Absolutely.
So what's the most effective, what's the biggest way to spend money in education is from an investment point of view? And I think that is totally missing from this dialogue.
Because that's the important word. The most important word, what you said is if.
Right.
Obviously, I would hope that we would agree, and I would hope that almost all Americans, except perhaps the president, by that I mean any president and the members of Congress, would agree that our money at some level has not been spent wisely if we have a $30+ trillion national debt, because I think before we can move forward, we're going to have to handle that. And that commits us to a certain amount of government spending that we may not want to do, but we've got to pay that debt down before we can take on any other major projects responsibly. And paying that debt down, it's not going to be an overnight thing. This is built up over something like 50 years. It's going to take time. It may be a multi-generational thing to pay it down. And this has no short-term benefits. You're going to have to cut out the pork, and I use pork in a very broad sense, even the valuable
No
products.
offense to our pig friends out there.
Yeah, vegan here. So, but that cutting that kind of spending in the short term is going to be very damaging to a lot of congressmen's careers, and so they have very little incentive to do it. And it doesn't matter. We don't have the money now. Any common sense view of the national debt will say, we don't have the money even for valuable projects, for mass transit projects, for environmental projects, for educational. We don't have that money. We got $31 trillion of national debt that we've got to pay down before we can take on anything, and it's not being done. All of this new revenue is being diverted into still more projects with that national debt not being static, but continuing to grow at an almost inconceivable rate.
Well, so on that subject, I think we agree that wiser decisions can be made about the way the government spends its money, and they consider an investment. I think the point is that pork, as such as it is generally a bribe for voters to support a particular person.
Indeed.
So the way people stay in office is doing exactly that. And it's not always just giving people another loaf of bread. Sometimes it's giving a subsidy to put a huge steel factory in, somewhere. And the congressman that allowed that project to take place will get all kinds of rewards, not only money on the table, campaign contributions, but also corrupt practices which happen after they leave office, or just understanding the stock market very well. So you have all this inside protected information. These things happen. Relatives get hired, and so I think it makes the point that there is a substantial amount of knavery, no surprise, in the way this money is spent, and could be improved. And that dialogue is not taking place in this electoral cycle that I can see. Now, one other point I will make or bring up is another way to take care of the national debt is to have a tremendous increase in the GNP, and along with that, it's having more inflation. So if the debt is demarcated, 5% interest, and we have a 30% inflation rate, almost anybody that has some of the U.S. debt is going to get a bad nip, and so that would take care of the debt. Kind of in Weimar Germany, they had their massive inflation, they had the debt, and so that's at least one way they did it. It was more complicated than that.
Yes, I have to note here, and we need to start winding down the next minute or two, but My wife Carol, who of course teaches Nazi Germany, she teaches
Yes.
German history, Imperial Russian history. But we have, she has framed on her office wall a $1,000,000 note from around 1930. And it's.
May I say I have a similar one?
Yeah,
I
oh,
think
we
this
must
is. I
compare.
think this
Yeah.
is five. I have a framed five. I don't know, whatever, maybe $5 million.
Yeah, I don't know the
Well, it's some
exact
kind of
number, but
number.
it's a huge, massive
Right,
number.
right. It's a lot of numbers, and it's there as a reminder. That could be a government policy, and of course that would be extremely destabilizing.
Quantitative easing is
if the-
is colloquially known these days.
And all kinds of bad things could happen, particularly to a vulnerable population. And I think the government's responsibility, which ought to be firmly stated, and they don't state that, is we have 350 million people here. I'd like to see the presidential candidates discuss this. We have 350 million people of all kinds of ethnic connections, interests, whatever, and it's very difficult to have a simple answer for all their problems. And so what the president's job should be to be a balanced figure to navigate the difficult troubled waters and address these problems and provide stable leadership and also non-confrontational leadership. The demonizing both candidates are hard at work at ad hominem attacks on each other and saying your supporters are terrible people. Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables. I believe I might have been in that basket, but I accept her condemnation, I guess. But certainly calling American citizens bad people is not a way to unite the country. And indeed, one of the failures of President Biden was everyone hoped that he would be a stabilizing centralist figure. And that turned out not to be the case.
Well, we have seen that, and this really needs to be our last
yes.
point, but we have seen that over and over again of people campaigning as centrists, and then the moment they win, they turn sharply right, or more frequently, sharply left. And once again, it's for the short-term gain. Through, who was it? Was it Bismarck who said that God has looks after madmen, fools, and Americans. That through luck or hard work or something, we built up a magnificent country over a couple of hundred years. But it seems for the past 50 or so, speaking in business terms, that our parties are squandering these centuries of goodwill for short-term gains and turning us against each other. And my last comment, we need to wind down.
Well, all right,
how do we
Buck.
fix it?
So we'll talk some more on this important subjects, and let me thank you for being here with your wise comments, and we'll speak another time.
I
Thank
look
you.
forward to it.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.